Hello there. Welcome to the Maker Manager Money Podcast, a podcast to inspire entrepreneurs to keep going and for entrepreneurs to just start. My name is Kyle Knowles, and today's guest is David J. Greer. David is an entrepreneurial coach with over 40 years of experience in the business world. He specializes in working with entrepreneurs to achieve high performance and growth, including entrepreneurs facing challenges with addiction. David has a background in software engineering and has built a multi-million-dollar software company. He is also an author and public speaker, sharing his insights in his book, Wind in Your Sails: Vital Strategies That Accelerate Your Entrepreneurial Growth. This book contains topics like culture, strategic planning, and team alignment. He draws on his personal experience, including sailing and recovery, to help entrepreneurs navigate the challenges of business. Welcome to the show, David.
Thanks, Kyle. I loved your introduction. Thank you for that.
Thank you for joining me today and being so generous with your time. Where are you dialing in from?
I am dialing in from Vancouver, Canada.
I don't think I've had a guest from Canada yet. And I've got another one lined up after you, so I'm excited to have some Canadians on the show.
Turns out there's a lot of entrepreneurs in Canada too.
A lot. There are definitely a lot of innovation going on up in Canada for sure. So I wanted to start out, just since it's the new year, what's your biggest goal for this year?
My biggest personal goal is I'm dealing with some chronic back issues from being a super active person all of my life. And I have some compression in one of my discs, and it's impacting. I've already been working on it. I've had it for a couple of years, but my goal is to really find some new ways to improve this in 2025. So that's my big personal goals. While I coach and really encourage entrepreneurs to set goals for the business and themselves, as I'm, getting a little older, and one of my challenges is I work too hard. For the last couple of years, I've actually given myself permission not to set goals and to just be more present to kind of the moment and what's happening. Now, having said that, I didn't write it down to have a goal of being on one podcast a week last year, but I found that over time that was my goal, and typical entrepreneur, I got halfway to goal, so I got 26. But some of my work with my coach is actually getting better at just actually not being so driven. So that's like a long-term goal, but it turns out I'm so driven that they tend to emerge even if I haven't written them down.
Yeah, the goals just come out of your pores because that's the way you're wired.
That's the way exactly. I'm just super hardwired that way.
And you've had tremendous success in the business world, failures, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I've finished your book, Wind in Your Sails, and I love the analogies with sailing. I don't know anything about it. I'm from Utah, right? I live in Utah. There's no, except for the Great Salt Lake.
I grew up in the Alberta prairies, but I still learned. But my parents had a summer cabin on a well-known lake in Alberta, so that's actually where I learned to sail.
Okay, just on a lake. That's really awesome. So what I'm trying to say here is that you're so wired, and the reason you had success is because of all those the ambition. I mean, the way I see you after finishing your book, it's about ambition, and you're also about adventure. You're a captain,
mm-hmm.
which is very ambitious, and you're also and adventurous, right? But you're also a coach.
Yep.
How did you get to a point, and what would you say to entrepreneurs starting out? Because you're, coaching now more than your day-to-day in the grind of growing a business. What do you say to entrepreneurs about all that anxiety and fervor and ambition, and how do you carve out time for yourself so that you don't, I guess, get burned out?
Sure. So I'd like to just go back in a couple of things you said, because I want to add one kind of idea to what you suggested, which is vision. So when I was in grade 8 or 9, so I grew up in Edmonton, which is the provincial capital of the province of Alberta. And I remember getting taken like a field trip to the government buildings because, right, the provincial capital is there. And I think we like just passed by some windows from the outside. I could see into this massive computer room and spinning tape drives. Like I still can visualize it in my head. And there was that. And then my math teacher in grade 8 or 9 taught me octal arithmetic. So we count to 10 because we have these 10 digits on our hands, but you can count to 2 or you can count to 8. And that's the beauty of this system we use to keep track of numbers, is this idea of 0 to represent nothing. Those two things, like by grade 9, I had a vision. I wanted to take computers and business and put them together. I really honestly don't know where that vision came from, except those two examples that I just shared. And that propelled me for like over 25 years. And sometimes when I work with a new client as a coach and they've had a business for a while and they're overworked or they're not taking breaks or they've kind of lost sight, often the question I'll ask them is, why did you start the business? Which gets back to like, usually entrepreneurs start a business because they see, well, either they hate being in a job, so the alternative is to have your own business. And that's okay. That's like, it's okay to have a vision of, I don't want to work for someone else because I've tried that and it doesn't work. But a lot of entrepreneurs also like see a need in the marketplace and then invent something or create something or find a way to supply something that satisfies that need. But as their business grows and they become more successful and they hire employees, they often have lost sight of the essence of, oh, right, like I love going and solving problems for people. And sometimes, so it's really just helping them either to get back in that vision, or maybe they need a new vision. It's like they've satisfied that market and, now they need to find what's next and create a new vision. Or maybe it's a new vision for what the business looks like 3 or 5 years from now. And that's a lot of my work. Is also like when I built Robel, which is the software company I was with for 20 years, we did it like most entrepreneurs do it, which is, hey, let's like do 10% better than last year, without really any like independent market knowledge or reason to think that we could do 10% better, except we just said we do 10% better and we're high achievers, so we do 10% better. But we never sat down and said, like, where do we want to be in 3 years or 5 years? Like, what does that look like? This isn't new. It comes from a guy, Vern Harnish, and his books are The Rockefeller Habits and Scaling Up. And I specialize kind of in working with his templates and his framework and ideas. And I remember the first time I went to a training course with Vern, and he like talked about, where are you going to be in 3 years? And it blew my mind. Like I'd never thought of it that way.
And did it blow your mind because just because that seemed like too far out, or?
I never thought of like looking at my business from that perspective.
Okay.
Like, where do I want to end up in 5 years? And also, where's my market going to be in 5 years? Like, what is it going to look like? Is it still growing? Is it shrinking? Is it like, I didn't really look at it from a market position either. Like for some entrepreneurs, if they're working in a high growth market, if the market is growing 15% compound annual growth, and your business is growing 5%, you're actually losing market share because your business isn't growing at the same rate the market's growing. Which again, if you're okay with that, like my big thing with clients is to make conscious choice. You make whatever choice you want, but my request is make it a conscious choice. This whole idea of looking out 3 to 5 years, and especially looking at it from a market perspective, where's the market going to be and where are you going to be in that market in 3 to 5 years time versus where you are today? And what's your vision of what that looks like? So that's the piece that I think helps sustain us because we're pulling to a bigger goal. You asked me about my goals. I have an overreaching purpose that I'm living, which is to share my experience, strength, and hope in business, and to share my experience, strength, and hope in recovery. And that's why I do all these podcasts. This is a way, one of the ways that I get to experience, to share that experience, strength, and hope, because I think I have some important messages that could help people. And so that's what keeps me motivated. That's my vision for moving forward. That's, I've been very successful as an entrepreneur. I don't need to work for money, although it's useful because I can travel more and have nicer kinds of experiences. But honestly, I don't have to work for money, right? Like, because I have been very successful. But this bigger purpose keeps me going. And then, I want to be fairly compensated for my time. So yeah, I do run this business, the coaching business, and I do charge people, a reasonable amount of money that's representative of what I can deliver to them. It also keeps them honest. Yeah, I've done a lot of mentoring. When people pay you money, even if they have a lot of money, like the fact every month I'm going to send them an invoice and I'm going to charge the credit card, they show up for calls. They do more of the work. Like, it's just funny how that works. The euphemism we use, if you got skin in the game.
Right.
Right. Which you do. Like, it's not someone else's money. It's yours. Right. And if you don't have enough at the end of the month, you'll know. Like, and you can't just go somewhere and get bailed out. Like, you have to figure it out.
I guess going back to kind of this conversation about where you are now, and this is later in your career and you're coaching and you're trying to dial in your, that ambitious self, the goals. If you were to go back to David when he was right in the midst of it's Robel, right?
Mm-hmm.
You helped grow. Are there things that you would tell that younger David, knowing what you know now, that might help you back then, maybe not be so addicted to the drug of, constantly on the go?
Yeah, I tell my younger self, hey, it's all going to work out.
Okay.
I think we're so driven to a certain outcome and we try and control so much that is really not controllable. Like, I think it is important to have written down goals, and especially for your business, and from a personal and from a team perspective, like, so everyone's pulling in the same direction. It really increases the odds that you're going to have it. But at some point, you have to realize that, like, you have these ambitious goals, and really good management teams are really good at predicting the goals they're going to achieve and achieving them. And there's a lot that's out of your control. And so a lot of my growth, especially since coming into recovery, is getting much clearer about what I can control and what I can't, and what I want to influence and what I want to let go of.
I want to talk a little bit about addiction and recovery. I know there's addiction with substances, but do you find that entrepreneurs, because I've talked to a lot of them, they're addicted to the work? And in fact, I had one entrepreneur on my podcast that basically wanted to apologize to his family because he was so addicted to the work that he was neglecting his family. So do you want to talk about the differences between maybe substance abuse kind of addictions and being addicted to being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I'm not expert on that because my addiction is alcoholism, which is what we would call an ingestion addiction, right? So that's like a drug. You poke a needle in your body, or you take something up your nose, or alcohol, you ingest it, or food, again, you ingest it. And then we have process addictions, which is so that would be workaholism, would be gambling, would be sex addiction. And the addictions are all the same in that, or at least this is my belief, we're trying to avoid or alter how we feel. In workaholism, it could be that we don't feel worthy enough. And so, like, we work and work and work because that's how we feel worthy. Or it's literally like, I'm on the edge of workaholism. I mean, I've done enough personal work. I have this amazing taskmaster spirit, which has been with me probably since I was 3 or 4 years old. And shit, does it know how to get stuff done. But it's also, it's a coping mechanism. It's like, that's how because I had a narcissistic father and I was always trying to get his attention. And this was one of the ways that I coped, was being able to get a lot done and achieve things. So I've had to look at that. And for me, it's very subtle because sometimes it's like I'm already out the door and going for a walk. And it's like, how did I get here? Oh, well, because my taskmaster spirit decided I need to be in action. So again, we get back to trying to be more in conscious choice. Like, there is no work-life balance. There's work-life choices. And so we may choose at times to like be very hyper-focused on our business and be really all in on that in 15-hour days. But again, you want to do it with conscious choice where you're telling your spouse, you're telling your kids, this is this period, and then you want to do your best to honor that. So, if it's a 15-day sprint because you've got a massive trade show and it's going to hugely impact the business, then like if you booked a week off for when that finishes, which usually you don't because you're so excited about all the leads that you got at the trade show. Now you're feeling anxious if you don't process those leads and get them into the CRM and start following up with them and ... I've been there, done that, right? And then so you're back into work. No matter how hard you work, it like you are worthy whether you work or not. But that takes, understanding those things and doing the personal work and the personal growth work to realize like why you're working so hard. Like I got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I admitted to an amazing coach that I had a drinking problem, and he coached me to go to 12-step recovery. But it took me 20 years to get to that point. Like, so we all have some trigger, in alcoholism, we often talk about it as a bottom, like we bottomed out. But I think for pretty well all addictions, there has to be that trigger event where suddenly it's not working anymore, or we've lost everything, or, my wife's divorced me because I work too much. And for some people, that's not enough. It's okay. I'm going to keep working. I'm going to solve the pain of my divorce by working harder. Or it's like the threat of separation is enough to be a wake-up call. And again, it's different for every individual.
And I don't think that there's enough talk about these kinds of situations for entrepreneurs, because I've found entrepreneurs to be very wired in a similar way to you. Mm-hmm. Accomplishment and very, action oriented, massive action and lots of hours. And I think these things that you talk about, either whether the anxiety or relationships or addiction, are kind of go along with maybe this personality type.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I love adrenaline.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like there's enough talk about kind of maybe the negative side effects of entrepreneurship?
Well, and even if we kind of go beyond just the negative, I think the emotional component of being an entrepreneur is not talked about. Partly because we live in a society where talking about emotions is not something that's particularly rewarded. It's more judged and put down. Mm-hmm. Right? Like this is part of why I come on podcasts. I talk about my feelings and I talk about some of the difficulty around this because I agree. It's not socially acceptable to a large extent. People that are entrepreneurs and start their own business get very scared when they think about being vulnerable with their employees. And there is a line there. You don't want to be so vulnerable. Your employees are like scared for the future of the company and their jobs. But also, you're a human being and you have fears too, just like they do. And appropriately sharing it, I think, is important. And yes, it's not. I think the other piece, I have one of my clients who's looking like I'm going to knock on wood here, because he's been wanting to sell his business for a couple of years, and it looks like that's probably going to happen this month. But some of my work with him is like, who are you going to be if you don't have that business? Like our ego inevitably gets wrapped up a lot in what we build and what we create and and also in the relationships that we create. And so once you step away from that, so how will you replace that? How will you let go of that piece? And there is a very big emotional component to it. And, some entrepreneurs say, well, I'll just sell my business. I'll start another one. Well, it's a lot easier to keep an existing business going than to go find or start another one. I think people are really surprised at how difficult that is. Even though you've been very successful and done it once, it oftentimes, like for me, a lot of it was vision, but also, and being open to opportunities, but also being in the right place at the right time. And an opportunity that good has not shown up yet in my life since. And of course, I didn't know it at the time, just how good it was going to be, and no way that I could. But now, looking back over a 40-year career, I have a deeper appreciation. And I'm still glad I sold in 2001 because it gave me opportunities to do things that I hadn't even realized how deeply I'd dreamed them until the opportunity was there.
Yeah, I think we're lucky to have one great opportunity in our careers, and very lucky to have more than one.
Yeah, well, I don't want to. I want your listeners to still have optimism. Like, I still think, but I mean, the Robel opportunity was like a 10x, 100x kind. I've had great opportunities and I have taken advantage of them, but it's just not at the scale of what we achieved there, right?
No, you can have success everywhere you go, for sure. I'm just saying, usually there's one big success compared to the others. For sure. So I want to talk about your book a little bit, the strategies that are literally chapters within your book. And let me just list these chapters and strategies for the listeners: entrepreneurial, corporate, innovation, marketing, sales, product, people, operational, financial, and exit strategies are what you talk about in the book. And I was very surprised and pleased because when I just read the title, not knowing anything about the book, I didn't know exactly what you were going to talk about. And then what I found in the book is basically everything you know about business that you've learned the past, I don't know when you wrote the book, but the past 35, 40 years, whatever it is, that you put all of that in there. It's literally a blueprint. And then at the end of each chapter, there are specific tasks that you request people to do so they can move their business forward. I wanted to ask you, out of those 10 strategic areas, what's your number one skill? Which one of those is your number one?
So I'll answer it and not answer it. So I think for most entrepreneurs, owner-founders of their own business, and this certainly was true for me, of those 10, usually you're really good at 3 or 4. And then okay at 3 or 4 more, and 2 you've never heard of.
Or you're really bad at? I don't know.
Yeah, or either or.
So what are the 3 or 4 for you then?
So the 3 or 4 for me was certainly innovation, marketing, product, and people. I, later on got better, I think, at corporate planning and the stuff that we talked about at the start of our conversation, looking 3 years out, having a very small set of goals. Entrepreneurs either have no goals or too many goals, in my experience. And then the entrepreneurial growth journey, which is really my first chapter, I didn't really appreciate or understand. I mean, I think Bob and I did a good job of growing ourselves, but we did it unconsciously, as opposed to more consciously. And, my belief is the single biggest limiting factor for any business is the entrepreneur herself or himself.
And what does that mean? They limit the business because of...
Yes, they limit the business because either they have internal belief systems that don't believe it can be as big as it potentially could. I mean, there's any number of reasons. Classic is entrepreneurs who, Bob and I were pretty disciplined guys. I got to give us that. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs where, they start the year and we're going off to the left. And then, 6 weeks in, we're going to deke to the right. Oh, look, there's a shiny red ball over there on the horizon. We're going to go chase that down. And it drives staff crazy, and it really kills momentum. And so some of the becoming a really good entrepreneur, I believe, is to having the discipline to say, we're going to set a set of goals for the year and the quarter, and we're going to stick to them. And unless some new brutal fact or something really new shows up, at least for the quarter, we're going to really stick with what we said. And oftentimes even, with some of my clients, we're halfway through the quarter and they're veering off. Just a sec, you said this is what's important to you. You said this is the goals to achieve in order to get to what's important to you. Oh yeah, but well, what do you want? Do you want that shiny thing that looks exciting right now just because it's new and different? or you're going to get back to the discipline and the grind. And some of it is, sometimes in business, you just got to grind stuff out. Like I still think it's fun, but it's like, there's fun in all caps. Mm-hmm. And there's kind of fun in lowercase 9-point font. And sometimes we're in the lowercase 9-point font. We think, oh, this isn't worth it. Well, it will be, because you're going to get to someplace you want to go. And so sometimes it's just having that. Not sometimes, I think almost all the time, the leader, the entrepreneur, needs to stay disciplined on that. Or you need to step back and become like chairman of the board of your business and hire a really good manager who will stick with it. And then you can help set strategy and help set the direction of the company and understand the market, because I think those are the most valuable things. And then maybe you become chairman of 5 other businesses. You don't run any of them, but you take that strategic vision, and I help people to understand what it is that they love to do the most and what they're best at, and then help them to go find more of that, or to eliminate, like hire people so they don't do the parts of the job that doesn't motivate them and doesn't keep them excited.
What are some of the tools that you use to help them understand what they're good at?
I use Strength Finders 2.0.
Okay.
So you can buy the book. You can probably just go online and sign up. I give every new client a copy of the book, which comes with a coupon. So for the readers or the listeners that don't know, Strength Finders is just the basic idea of it is we have in the world, there's kind of 42, I forget the exact numbers, but 43 strengths. And almost all of us exhibit kind of 5 of those 42 are personal strengths. And you go, you buy the book, there's a coupon in it, use the coupon to go take their self-assessment. And out of that self-assessment pops out your 5 strengths. And my belief system and my coaching practice is that we should focus on our strengths. Like we can take something we're weak at and we can move it from, at a, say, 4 out of 10 to a 5 out of 10. That probably takes a year, probably takes a lot of intense work. And in the big scheme of things, if you're a business, we haven't moved the needle. We can take one of your strengths that it's 95%, and we can move it to 95.5. It'll probably have a massive impact on your business. So I always start to get them to do Strength Finders. Oftentimes for my clients, at least one of the strengths is a big surprise. Some of my clients are open to looking at those strengths in detail. Some aren't. The ones that are, if I usually do at least an hour session, we go through them. And the other problem with our strengths is when we are too strongly in our strengths. So I would say a third of my clients, the number one strength is competitiveness. So it's a great strength to have, right? And you can get a lot of stuff done. You compete against your competitors. But then I say, like, how's it working out to compete with your spouse? How is it working out to compete with your children? And usually they are completely unconsciously competing all the time with these people, like constantly. And they usually realize, maybe that's not how I want to live my life. Or again, I just ask that they make conscious choice. So if you and your wife are super competitive and that works for you, go for it. But just know that you're both being super competitive. And don't do it unconsciously, which is probably how you've been operating for some time. So that's one of the things to help entrepreneurs. So get back into their strengths. As I mentioned earlier on our interview, why did you start the business? Are you doing those things in the business that you really love? Some entrepreneurs, they love the startup phase. They love the figuring out the market and that early product or service design and figuring that out. And then, they become super successful and now they got 100 customers and now they have 50 employees, and like managing all the employees and, figuring out V5 of the product, like it doesn't get them out of bed in the morning. Like, because what they love is the startup phase and new. And so I help them, like maybe they can do it within their own business. Maybe they need to go do it with another business. Like, I don't know what the solution will look like, but first what we're trying to ID is the problem. The problem is you're bored because it's just like operating the business and making it better. And that's not what really gets you excited. Like for me, I'm that kind of entrepreneur. So if I have a really well-running business, I'll probably break something so I have something to fix. So you'd be much better getting me out of there. and here's the deal. Like for everything you hate doing, there's someone that loves to do it. With my first coach, Kevin Lawrence, that I worked with for 9 years, that was one of the things he'd keep reminding me. You don't like administration? There's some person who loves administration.
Mm-hmm.
It's their bread and butter. They love getting out of bed and doing that. So go find someone like that and stop doing the stuff you don't like.
But do you find a lot of entrepreneurs just want that control over like so many things?
Absolutely.
Even if they're not good at it.
You have to also look at the path for most entrepreneurs. If you're an owner founder of a business, you started probably by yourself or maybe with a co-founder, and you did everything. Like, right? And then you grew it by the seat of your...
At one point you were doing all of it.
Yeah. And by the way, you figured it all out because that's why you're still in business.
Yeah.
So it's very hard for a lot of those entrepreneurs to bring someone else in and let go. Again, it's kind of the letting go of control, which I alluded to earlier in terms of outcome, but it's also the letting go of control and managing people, because they might have a completely different way of doing it than you do. Maybe it's 10 times better, but it's not your way. And you know that your way worked to get you where you are in the business. But here's a secret. That way probably won't get you to the next level of your business. Like sometimes people hire me because they have really struggles with their senior leadership team. Well, yeah, because they assign things to the senior leadership team and then the person goes off and tries doing it for a week. And then immediately the entrepreneur grasps the steering wheel back and tells them they're useless and they're not getting anything done and tells them exactly how to do it. Like, this does not make for happy people. This does not make for great leaders. And, my personal belief that leadership is about making the people you lead be successful. And your job is to get impediments out of their way, get resources for them to be successful, and then help coach them and help them to grow to be the best they can be. Now, most entrepreneurs did not grow their business acting that way. They were control freaks.
Yeah.
So it's a big shift, and I don't want to lessen it,
Yeah.
And usually with clients, we work at it for a year or two to just help to get the white knuckled grip of the steering wheel. First of all, they let it go enough that the knuckles aren't white.
Yeah.
And then I get maybe one finger to come off the steering wheel. It's a process.
Yeah. And I guess that's part of founder syndrome, right? Where it's holding on so tightly to the business still.
Either that, or you you have to take that part of the business that you're no longer good at and you have to grow yourself to become like a marketing wizard. Marketing, you figured stuff out, but you're not really a strategic marketer. You haven't trained in that. You haven't grown your career in that. And I've helped entrepreneurs to become strategic marketers, but they have to understand that that's a weakness and that that's something that they want to fill in, either by hiring someone or by growing their own skill set to be able to see it that way. And especially because I have a variety of clients in all industries now, but because my background's tech, obviously I attract a certain amount of technology people because, in tech people, it's always the answer is more technology. Well, maybe it's not more technology. Maybe you need to think about it strategically from a marketing point of view. Because sometimes, and I talk about it in Wind in Your Sails a little bit, sometimes a trivial change to a product can dramatically improve its acceptance in the marketplace. But as a computer scientist engineer, it's well, that wasn't hard. So people only value things that are really hard technical problems that I solve. Well, turns out that's not true. That's just what you feel, right? Because that's what you train for and that's what you are super good at. But it could be that something you spend 5 minutes on in the code is actually tens of millions of dollars of value to the marketplace, right? And so some of it is with technical people is helping them understand that coming technical difficulty, while that has its place and probably gives you great competitive advantage, it's not all.
Yeah, and I'm just amazed because you have this software engineering background, right? And then when you list out, obviously innovation and product are part of that when you list out sort of your strengths in these 10 strategic areas, but you also list marketing and people, which isn't always attached to someone in software engineering.
I'm a very weird software engineer who can walk and chew gum at the same time. There aren't a lot of us.
For sure. And so this podcast is called Maker, Manager, Money.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it is because I've just come to figure out over 35 years of working in business and reading self-development books and all this other stuff, you basically have to make something, right? And then you can't just make something and then there's money on the other side of that. Right. You have to manage what you made, you either through manufacturing, marketing, sales, all those kinds of things. And the combination of the two, making something that's, product market fit, whatever. And then managing it on the other side of that is money. And
yes,
when I look at you and your background and finish your book, I'm like, this guy is a maker, right? That's what your main interest was. And that's probably why you went into software engineering in the first place, is to make things. And then some of your stories that you tell about, just a weekend writing some kind of email program for the business, right? And then ending up selling that as well to customers that you were just using internally. I'm just like, maker, maker, maker. If you're dealing with all these entrepreneurs, do you find most of them are makers or most of them sort of the managers?
Way more makers. Again, the marketing, they're makers and they've achieved a certain market piece. But I also find that oftentimes some technology, like more engineering oriented entrepreneurs I work with, really struggle with seeing their own worth of what they've created. Like it's very hard for them to see the value in what they've created. And I talk to them for a while and then I remind them, look, you told me this and this and this. So your customers must be feeling this about you. Like that you're uber reliable, that, you show up, that your products actually work in the field. And you may not appreciate just how valuable that is in a sea of technical products that more often than not, fail in the field. So you've created something very special, right? And it's of much higher value. Now, some of this, you would have read in my book, Winning Your Sales, and for your listeners, I joined this young software startup at 22. I was the first employee after the founders. Basically it had been in business for 2 years. And a condition of my employment was I had to present a paper at the Hewlett-Packard International User Group Convention when I was 22, which I ended up doing. I still remember how scared I was going on stage for the first time. But I'm 22, standing up in the San Jose convention floor, selling software, and I have no frickin' clue that's what I'm doing. Or I'm really marketing software. I'm telling a bunch of computer geeks about this cool stuff and what it could do for them, which later I learned was kind of the essence of marketing and sales. And within 2 years, 3 years, I probably was giving 80% of the demos at trade shows. Because, and this gets back to why I think I'm good at people skills. Someone come up to us in the booth, I would ask them about how they develop software, what their environment was like, how many people were on the team. And I would listen for 5 minutes. And then I would take one of our product offerings and I would show them only 5% of the product. But I would show them the exact 5% that applied to their environment, how they developed software, how they worked. And that is really the essence of marketing, where you can communicate to someone about their problems and then show them the pain that they're in with those problems, and then show them your pain pill, which was our product, and how it's going to really solve their pain. Which to me, that's the essence of really great marketing. Understanding the pain in the marketplace. The bigger the pain, the better your pain pill, the more value there is. And so I just help people to see that, because oftentimes they can't see it as much as I can, being independent and being away from it. Like I've got distance and experience.
I love the section on marketing because that's kind of my background, and I really enjoyed the way how you talked about you should be talking about the customer and the market, not about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I used to have the saying that, it's about them. It's not about us. It's about them. And what you see a lot of times is you go on LinkedIn and you see company pages or other things and you see these posts. And if you're looking at it from their perspective, it's about us. It's like, look how great we are.
Yeah, where it's even a LinkedIn profile. It's all about me, me, me. I did this. I did that. I'm wonderful. I have all these skills. Whereas, I think a much better profile is when working with this company, I took it from X to Y by bringing these skills to the organization.
That's good advice. Yeah.
It's showing people how if they hired you, what would they get? Like, what would they get for their business? And by showing that, I think you create a lot more belief in you as the individual and the career person, because you're much more clearly articulating the value you're going to bring rather than just talking about what you do. I'm not as interested in what you do. I'm more interested in what in your doing, how do you change my organization to achieve my goals?
We're running out of time, David, so I wanted to get to just a couple of questions. But first of all, I just wanted you to tell just quickly, when you left the company and sold it, you took 2 years off to sail. Yep. And just talk about why you made that decision and what you did.
Okay, so I'll back it up slightly. So I mentioned on our talk today that I joined this younger software startup at 22. I stayed 20 years, liked the place, grew it into a global powerhouse. And my first, my boss, the co-founder, Bob, 10 years in, I became his partner. And in our 20-year relationship, we only had one major disagreement, but it was a doozy and it ended in divorce. And it wasn't, I would say, expected. Like, it wasn't something I was trying to make happen. It was something that happened. So in early 2001, I'm out on the street. We'd had a major disagreement about the strategic direction of the company. We had 2 strategies, which I think both were sound strategies, but they were not complementary. And we solved it by him buying me out. So I'm on the street. I got a pretty good sized check in my jeans. And I'm busy. This is in 2001. It's something called the dot-com meltdown has happened. I haven't even really noticed it because I've been living in my own little kind of insulated space, business space, and chasing deals, which, weren't going that well. Someone smarter than me sat me down and said, David, your kids will never be 11, 9, and 5 again. Do you need to work right away? And I'm like, no, I am doing okay. I'm not done for life, but I don't need to work right away. And then she said that when she had a career transition, she went to Australia and bought a VW van, and she spent a year touring around Australia in her van. And if your listeners can imagine the most cheesy, cartoonish light bulb going off over my head, that is literally what happened sitting in the chair across from her that day. Like, it was poof. So I'd been sailing since I was 12, so obviously had a lot of sailing experience. I had been reading about long-term cruisers and families who went like offshore for, by that point, probably close to 20 years. And I did not realize how big a dream that was till like the potential for the dream was suddenly there. And it was a gift that I came out of Robel, because I don't think I ever would have done it if I'd stayed within the company. When Margaret Livingston made that statement to me, Carolee and I hatched this plan. We looked at 3 different plans, but the one we settled on was to commission a boat in the south of France and to homeschool our kids. Of course, it's typical entrepreneur. The goal was to homeschool our kids for a year and see the whole Mediterranean. Well, it took 2 years. So it took twice as long as we thought. So yes, we spent 2 years living on a sailboat and sailing more than 5,000 miles, 10,000 kilometers in the Mediterranean basin, and had one of the most important experiences of our life and a legacy that we still have as a family today. And makes me look like a genius as an entrepreneur because it was the best 2 years to sit out the technology industry out of the last probably 70. I wish I could say that I did that consciously. I didn't, but it worked out.
It was good timing. Good timing.
The timing was impeccable and was, and like I say, I didn't realize how big a dream it was until the dream suddenly became possible.
Yeah, it's a fantastic story. I love that story. Well, I just have a few personal questions for you, a lightning round of questions. And I've so enjoyed our conversation. We could talk about so many things in so many different areas, but I would encourage listeners to check out your book, Wind in Your Sails, and we'll put links to the book in the show notes and things like that. So here's the lightning round of questions. These are very softball, easy questions for you, David. Your favorite candy bar?
Coffee Crisp.
Favorite music artist?
That one varies a lot. Long term has been Oscar Peterson, the amazing Canadian jazz pianist.
Favorite cereal?
Raisin Bran.
Mac or PC?
Longtime Windows guy, and for the last dozen years, completely committed Mac guy. And loving it.
Google or Microsoft?
Google.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Phantom or Les Mis?
Les Mis.
All right. So the last two questions for you, David. What's the worst thing about being an entrepreneur? And then what's the best thing about being an entrepreneur?
Worst thing, I think, is the loneliness. Trying to do it all yourself. I really encourage entrepreneurs to not do that. Although for most entrepreneurs, it's really hard to ask for help. The best thing is you control your destiny, right? You get to get up every morning and decide. I mean, it might not feel like it some days, but you really do get to get up every morning and decide what to work on, what to do, where to go. You know, you get to lead an organization, and there's probably nothing more fulfilling for people that are wired like you and me.
I love it. I love those answers. So the last question, only because we had an intro call and we talked briefly about this. How much did being adopted fuel your ambition and possibly your success?
I think an unanswerable question. So, listeners won't know, but I was adopted at birth. And then when I turned 60 and with 9 years of sobriety, I decided to pursue my birth families, and I ended up finding them. And, I've done a lot of work around this. And I think there's some truth that when you're adopted, there is that initial piece of abandonment. Like, for example, I was adopted in 1957, and my birth mother never wanted to talk to me, so I have no factual basis for this, but I've read enough books. It's inconceivable that my birth mother held me after I was born. I would have been taken away because that's how it was done. So what impact does that have? I'm not sure. I mean, there's certainly a story from my parents, the parents that adopted me are their mom, their dad, and I've always known about being adopted. But there was a story about being the chosen one, like they went to the hospital and, chose me out of a lineup kind of thing. I later learned that's not true, so I think that there's some of that drive comes from wanting to please my parents because I'm the chosen one.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for answering that question, David.
And before we close, like just a minute or two ago, I said, don't do it all alone. And I do have an offer for your listeners, which is if I offer 1 hour of free coaching to anyone that wants it. And if you go to my website, which will be in the show notes, but it's coachdjgreer.com, you just Google my name, you'll find it. And in the top left corner, every page is my phone number and my email address. Just reach out to me and we'll book a time and we'll spend an hour on something that you're really stuck on. And I promise you'll have 3 ideas to get unstuck before we're all done. So that is an offer to all of your listeners.
That is awesome. That's an amazing offer. I hope some people take advantage of that. David, again, thank you so much for being on the show today. I hope you have a lovely rest of the week.
Super. Thanks so much, Kyle. It was just a lovely treat to be on the show today.